Welcome, everybody, to Open Office Hours with Cory Vance. I just want to start by explaining a little bit about Open Office Hours. Basically, I just wanted to give a chance for you, the viewer or the listener, to get to know me a little bit and what I'm about. I know financial planning, money, investments, these can all be sort of scary topics for some people or intimidating. And I just wanted to give a warm welcome and an introduction, an easy access way for people to get to know an advisor. And so in doing that, I thought it'd be a great idea to bring on special guests and have those special guests share some of how they help people like you grow your business and or your portfolio. So I'm Cory Vance. What I do is I help business owners grow their business and portfolio together as two parts of one holistic financial picture. So I believe that your business is an important part of your life, but it shouldn't be thought of separately or completely separately from your personal portfolio and your personal wealth. So most people get into business to grow the business, to improve their personal life, right? Have more freedom, have more time, have more toys, whatever it is that you went into business for. But at the end of the day, you go home, you have your personal life, you go on holidays, you do different things with your family, you raise your family, kids, and they have sports and all these other kind of things. So it really is one big picture. And so I don't just help you with your portfolio wealth, I help you grow your business wealth too. And that means that together, both will grow faster. And ultimately, at the end of your time in your business, when it's time to exit, whether that's selling your business, whether it's handing it off to your children or whatever the case may be, you have the best opportunity to exit successfully and then go on to live the retirement life that you want. So that's why I'm doing this. And that's a little bit about me and what I believe. And to help facilitate that conversation tonight, I have a special guest with me, Laura Bechard, and she's the CEO and president of Provision Business Advisors. Laura is a CGA, I believe. I'll let her correct me if I'm wrong when she does her own introduction. So she's an accountant and she helps small business owners with processes and with strategy and walking through the plans that they have or that they need to have to be able to grow their business the way they want successfully and then eventually exit successfully. So welcome to Open Office Hours, Laura, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks, Cory. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so please give our viewers a little more fine-tuned introduction of yourself, and I'll sit back and listen for a bit.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. So like a lot of entrepreneurs, I've done a number of things in my past that kind of led me to where I am today. So in addition to being a CPA, I also have an MBA in finance strategy, and I also did dual degrees in education. So I have a master's degree in education as well, which is really handy with entrepreneurs when we start talking about delegation and developing their people. A lot of that educational background on how do we train, how do we develop, how do we design a training program so we can effectively delegate really comes to play when I'm working with entrepreneurs on those kinds of initiatives or those kinds of strategic endeavors. In addition to my academic background, my husband and I own and operate a grain farm in Saskatchewan. So we are fourth generation family business owners.
Cool.
So we have been through the transition, the acquisition, buying the business from my in-laws, and we're now sort of figuring out our succession and our exit plan for the family bar. Because we know farmers never retire, they just die. But we would like to not be having to operate the farm forever and having people coming in behind us to be working in the business or on the tools, as we say in business, business acumen, business vernacular. So my background really is finance and people. And so when we start talking about building valuable businesses, those two things go hand in hand because we cannot do it all ourselves, which is often why we've fallen into the owner's trap. As a small business owner, we have been doing everything ourselves. And so when we look at strategically, how do we start extricating ourselves from each one of the jobs we have in our business, that understanding of the human element and how do we impact change? So change happens because we not only know what we want to change, but we actually have a sound methodology of how to adopt and roll out that change. So yeah, my professional career was in higher education. So I've had leadership roles there, academic roles, instructional roles, worked in various aspects of different colleges throughout Alberta. And I also have a very broad background in not-for-profit organizations, being on boards, serving on boards for, I'd say 25 years straight, and then doing some volunteer work after that, even being a volunteer facilitator for the Alberta Government Board Development Program to help build the straight with not-for-profit organizations. So I come at this work with helping people build valuable businesses because of my family business background and the stories and the path that my husband and I walked through could have been easier on everyone had we had advisors involved in the family that could help walk us through the succession and the ultimate acquisition of the family business. Because what we did in family enterprise is it was an internal sale. So my in-laws sold it to us. So that's certainly one way you can exit your business, by selling to family or employees, or an existing partner, for example, an internal sale, or you can also be looking to sell your business to others. So along this path, I also completed my CIPA, which is a Certified Exit Planning Advisor, and I'm also an advisor with the Value Builder System, John Warrilow fame, which a lot of people are familiar with John Warrilow in the Built to Sell podcast. So he's the founder of the Value Builder System. So I'm one of their licensed advisors as well.
Excellent. And I really like what you said about two things really jumped out at me there. One thing, and then it led me to think of something else, is that we can't do everything ourselves. And that is so true. We can't do everything ourselves, and we can't know everything there is to know. Right. So that's why we have accountants that file our taxes and advise us on those things. We have lawyers that handle the legal matters for us. We have other coaches and other advisors that help us. And this whole topic of not only business success, but eventual exit planning is one that's close to my heart, because I've previously run different businesses. One in particular had all the earmarks of great opportunity for an excellent exit. And I did some things really well in that company, and I did some things really poorly, made some poor decisions, and I struggled to find advisors. I recognized I needed advisors that needed help, but I really struggled to find advisors that I could trust, that could guide me correctly along the path that I wanted to go on. And the combination of all, yeah.
Yeah, Cory. Yeah, and it's daunting sometimes for people to find and vet the advisors that they want to work with, and partly because they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what questions to ask, and in the business advisory space, there's a lot. It's not a regulated industry, and so that's why, as an accountant, people that I work with can rely that I am part of a regulated industry. I still have to pay my dues. I still abide with the code of conduct, and so I have that degree of rigor as a business advisor that you don't often find, because people just hang out their shingle and call themselves a consultant without necessarily having any experience or any credentials behind that. So it is very daunting. And, even a lot of my clients that I work with, I'm helping them figure out how to interview those individuals that they need in their organization, because again, that succession piece means I got to fire myself from all the jobs to get somebody else to do them. And so sometimes that resource that I need, I'm going to hire as an employee. Sometimes I'm going to need a fractional person. So I'm going to outsource that or contract that out. And I don't know how to hire those people. I don't know how to hire a bookkeeper. So I do the bookkeeping myself. And so those are the kinds of things that I help people with when we're going through that resource planning for workforce. And certainly some of the things that they're doing, they can replace with an automation, with a system or sort. But that again requires planning and intentionality. What's that system going to do? What do you want to automate? Where are the exceptions? What do you want to do manually? Who's overseeing it? Because even if it's a program, a system, somebody has to program it. Okay. So there still are people involved, even if you're looking at potentially replacing some of the tasks you do with some sort of an automation or system.
Right, exactly. And that's such a good point you make there about people. That's one of the biggest struggles I had when I had my business. I had at one time 5 locations in 5 different cities and up to 12 staff. And you have to really have people that you can trust in those positions. I can't be in 5 places at once And so I'd have to know that those people are trustworthy. And for the most part, I did have really good people working with me, but there were some serious challenges with some specific
Yeah.
employees. And like you say, knowing how to hire the right people. Like I'm not an HR specialist and I feel like I learned a lot, but I made so many mistakes in there.
Like you're hiring people, often the problem is you hire people you like.
Right.
And so you hire people that are like you. You hire people you like, not necessarily the people you need. And so, sometimes the best way of having a hiring process is not to do it yourself because your biases are not going to come into the equation. And so if you're using someone else to be doing that hiring or you use a process, then that can help. You can set up your process in a way that it'll mitigate those biases that you tend to fall into. And everybody has them. So some of them are conscious, some of them are unconscious, but we all have biases.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said earlier, you don't know everything, but you also don't know what you don't know. Right. So when you
Right.
make those mistakes, it's easy to get caught up in, well, I've hired this person. Well, let's see how it goes. Let's give them a shot and all that. But
Yeah, and I think about it like a language. Like, and sometimes when you're going to travel, you learn a few directional, like like I remember when I first learning Spanish, one of the things that was important was to know how to ask where the bathroom was. So, donde está el baño? So I know how to
exactly.
ask the question, but I don't understand the answer. And
Exactly.
give you the answer in Spanish. You have to understand the answer. And so that's kind of the same thing when you're looking at hiring consultants is you kind of know what questions to ask, but you don't understand their answers. And so sometimes you need someone to help you translate the answers because even though they've used a word that you think you know the definition of, it has a specific definition in this industry. And you really innocently just make a mistake and you misunderstand. I was talking to an individual a couple weeks ago who wants to has actually set up a social enterprise. And so she was talking to me about doing some fractional CFO work for her. And as I was talking to her about her organization, I thought, like, you don't get a fractional CFO. Well, like, you don't have enough work for a fractional CFO. You don't have enough complexity in your organization to have a fractional CFO. And she was, so happy that I didn't just try to sell her something she didn't need. And
Right.
I at the end of the call, I said, I will help you figure out what you do need, even if it's not. And
Right.
so, she was really thankful that I would continue to answer her questions so that she could either hire or outsource what she did need rather than hiring what she didn't.
Right. That's excellent. That's such a good point too, because I've been involved in different businesses as a management, as an employee, as an owner, and I've learned a ton of things, and I have much to learn yet. But bringing up folks like yourself and other partners that I've connected with and I'll be recommending to my clients, I don't need to know everything. I don't need to pretend to know everything to help people to grow their business, even their portfolio wealth. I have other advisors around me with more experience, more knowledge, different experience to help fill out whatever gaps might be there for me. So, that's fantastic. We have to put the client first, in this case, business owners, we have to put them first because ultimately, that's what they're the lifeblood of our economy, for one thing. But if we're going to actually help them grow, we need to do what's best for them. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm passionate about the smaller owner operating companies because that's what has been the mainstay of rural Saskatchewan. So that's where I'm from. I'm from Saskatchewan, and whether we're talking anywhere in the prairies or almost anywhere in Canada, we're such a rural country that if our rural areas, the entrepreneurs and the businesses and the economic activity in our smaller communities don't have succession plans and exit strategies, those people are shutting their doors at the end of the
That's right.
day. And they're
Yeah.
shutting their doors sometimes when they don't have to, either because they haven't started planning early enough. And so, one of the big questions I get is when do I have to start planning for an exit? I said, the day after you open the doors and you opened your business. It's when you start planning for your ultimate exit because it's going to happen, whether it happens 5 years, 25 years, 35 years from now, it is going to happen. And if you plan for it from day one, you exit on your own terms. You're more prepared for it every step of the way. You're more forward thinking rather than thinking historically or in the moment. You're more strategic right from day one. And so some of these business owners that owner operators have been focused on earning a living, not focused on growing a business that they could transition to someone else.
Right.
And sometimes they have unrealistic expectations, but sometimes they don't give themselves enough time to develop or recruit or find. They don't think about all the different exit options they could have. And they simply, and sometimes ego gets in the way, to be quite honest. And in
Imagine that.
some of our rural communities, those rivalries between towns run deep. And you used to play football against that guy in the other town, and there's no way you're going to sell your business to them because of that high school grudge you have 25 or 30 years ago. And so all of those factors come into play. And the more time we have, the more we can work on overcoming obstacles, reducing barriers, finding alternative ways to successfully exit your business.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'm chuckling because I grew up in Saskatchewan as well, and I loved, corner gas. And it just reminded me of that one episode, or the several, but they're talking about the town next door, and they're all like, it's like, we spit on them. And that's so common in so many places, but hopefully we mature and we outgrow that.
Yeah, or that
Okay.
person married your first girlfriend, and you built a grudge for 30 years. So I mean, that's where we talk about it's people involved in the business, and so that educational background of understanding how people, what makes people tick, and how do we, and some things, as one of my friends says, it's baked by the time you're 5. Like there's some things that are very hard to change in people's mindset and belief system when they're older, because those have been formed at a very young age. But it doesn't mean it's impossible, but it just takes time. I mean, if you think about the things that you believe today and how long it would take you to change just one belief. Think about political beliefs, think about beliefs we have about science and faith and all kinds of other things like that we just believe. The way we parent based on what we believe is a good parent. And if someone challenged our actions or our behaviors that we thought were being a good parent, how long would it take you to change your own belief system? And that's how long it takes for anyone to change a belief system. But they have to even want to be influenced by other ways of believing or other forms of believing for it even to take place.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to be someone who is willing and recognizes value in change and in improvement. And I'm glad you brought that up, because as a consultant, I give financial advice and I do financial plans for people. And a lot of financial planners, financial advisors, whatever you want to call them, they don't really like dealing with small business owners. Small business owners, entrepreneurs are a different kind of an animal. And having been one of those myself, and you've done that yourself too, I think we understand a little bit more than your average what some of those people go through. And for those reasons, they don't connect well with small business owners, and they don't want to deal with them. And small business owners, as you probably know, 80 to 90% of their wealth is tied up in their business. For that reason, most of them have a very small portfolio. They have small RSPs, they have small TFSAs, and a lot of financial planners just don't have time for that. So one thing I do differently, and which I'm quite proud of, and that's one reason why I want to help business owners grow their business wealth, because that's where a large part of their wealth is. But my 2 key requirements is not the size of your portfolio, it's your willingness and your appreciation for the value of advice, and the fact that you need to start to make some changes and that you're ready to make those changes. So
yeah, and one of the things you said earlier, Cory, really resonated with me when you talk about, the combination of personal and business. And so, often when we're having conversations about this, people talk about work-life balance, right? And they say I've almost eliminated that phrase from my vocabulary, because I really balance implies that there's from equality, there's equality. Right. And when you're an entrepreneur and you have a family, that is setting everyone up for unrealistic expectations. If you think there will be balance, you're setting up your family for unrealistic expectations. You're setting yourself up for unrealistic expectations, which is where frustration and conflict and friction arises in families and family businesses.
Right.
So I choose to talk about harmony because harmony means that you're always in a state of disequilibrium. But over a period of time, it kind of may all come out in the wash. But I know in my situation with the farm, it took decades before, you sort of felt that balance was coming back. But when our children were little and my husband was gone farming and I was doing the single mother stuff, there was no balance in my life.
Mm.
And there was no balance in my husband's life when he was trying to run the farm and work a full-time job and keep his wife happy and be a good dad and be a good nut. There was no balance in his life either.
That's
And
right.
so if we sort of just give up that notion that there's going to be balance and we instead accept sort of an harmonious environment and help, build communication systems that can build that harmony, that's where we find that there's more success. And business is a tool. When we're all growing up, we all have a choice of how we're going to support ourselves. And some individuals choose to be supported by the government. Some individuals choose to get a job. Some individuals choose to go into business. But whatever we've chosen to do in terms of earning our income, it is really to give us achieve our personal goals. And we make different choices depending on what those personal goals are. And sometimes we make those choices without really doing fully investigating the options. And as often you hear hindsight is 2020 and you get into a job or you get into a business, you say, "Oh, this isn't what I thought this was going to be." And then you have to sort of figure out what do you do? What do you need to do differently to
Yeah.
change the trajectory? And the same
That's right.
thing happens in a job. You get into a job, oh, this isn't what this was going to be. Now what? Now what?
Mm.
And if you gone into that job out of high school or you pursued post-secondary education and then got student loans up the yin yang and now you're working in this job, and I don't like this job. Now what?
Yeah.
So, I think it's recognizing that hindsight is always 2020. We always go into situations, whether it's a new business or a new job or a relationship with those rose-colored glasses on. We have a honeymoon phase, then reality strikes.
That's right.
And we either pull up put on our big girl or big boy panties and we get going and we overcome all the obstacles, or we pivot, we change trajectory, we rethink, we come back, but we cannot continue on the same path and expect different results.
That's right. Yeah. And I want to go back to something you said, because that reminded me of something you said earlier about starting to plan for your exit the day you open your business or start your business. I think that goes really well with just one reason why I wanted to invite you on as my special guest tonight and why we're working together on some projects and we'll do more in the future. As I think about, I've heard other experts say that it takes a minimum of 2 years to really properly set your business up for a sale, for an exit. And that makes a lot of sense to me. But at the same time, when I think about that, imagine the difference between, let's say you're running your business for 10 years and you decide, okay, I need to sell it. And you get an expert like yourself or someone else. And they say, okay, well, it's going to take 2 years, a minimum, right? So you take those 2 years, you have 10 years of kind of trying to figure it out on your own and making mistakes and up and down, this and that. Then you have 2 years where things sort of start to kind of come together and then you sell or you propose to sell, right? So you have 2 years of really good data and 10 years of mixed data, right? What if you, like you said, you started planning from day one and you had 10 years of good data, right? 10 years of strong sales, increasing revenues, profits are good, the good relationships, good culture, everything else. And then you decide you want to sell, right? Well, you don't necessarily need to wait 2 years to set everything up because you've already set everything up for that, right? But secondly, you've got a much longer track record of this business is capable of this and that and the other thing. And so
Yeah,
how much
not only
more attractive is it to someone else to come and buy
not
it?
only that, your business has been more fun.
Exactly. All those things that you went into business to enjoy, the lifestyle, the freedom, the
Yeah.
time,
I know. I
the
was helping a client a few years ago sell his business. And when he got into it, like he was, he wasn't in a panic because he did have some time, didn't have to rush out of the job. He didn't have a health care or anything like that, didn't have a lot of push factors, but he wanted to make sure that he could exit his business on his own terms. And he did know how he wanted to sell it and he wanted to sell to teen members. And so he needed to sort of figure out psychologically in his mind how he can do that and how we were going to decide which ones or, which one. But as we started working on delegating more to those team members to kind of test them to see who was going to rise to the occasion, it got to one point where he says, I'm only working part time. Maybe I don't have to sell anymore. So like a lot of the stress just went away
Yeah.
because he not only was building a more valuable business, but he wasn't in the line of fire anymore. He had delegated a lot of the stressful related tasks. He's taken more holidays. He was going on more snowboarding and cycling with his buddies. And he was loving his life.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And so much more of that is possible. Again, the earlier you start. And like I said before, when you can only know so much and you can only do so many things, right? And most people didn't go to business school, right? So
Right.
yeah, even if they did, they don't know everything, right? But most people not having gone to business school start out usually underfunded,
Capitalized.
undercapitalized. Yeah. Not realizing all the different parts of their business that need a full kind of attention, right? So there's several in ways they don't need to. Sorry.
Yeah, one of the other things you mentioned, Cory, was kind of that 2-year window. So where that comes from is the taxation kind of thing. So if you actually if you are incorporated, which mostly what we're talking about are companies that are incorporated, there's a special group of private companies that CRA wants to encourage is developed, and those are called Canadian controlled private companies. So many of the small business owners that we would work with would meet that definition of a sort of a Canadian controlled private company. But one of the reasons when people are starting to look at selling their company, they can either sell the assets of the business or they can sell the shares of the company. And so people would prefer to sell the shares of their company because of preferred tax treatment of a capital gain. And there's lifetime exemptions for capital. So you get a lot more money in your jeans at the end of the day if you can sell your shares than if you sell the asset. So, but in order to qualify, your company has to be what we call cleansed for a 2-year period. So that's where that 2 years comes from, because sometimes if people have been building up unproductive assets in their balance sheet, which includes cash, if you've got too much cash sitting in your corporate bank account, it can put you what we say offside for the capital gains exemption. And so then you need to be getting that cash either invested in more assets in your company that are earning revenue, like think about buying vehicles, buying real estate, buying capital, buying things that you're going to use in your business, or you've got to get the cash up. And so then that's a dividend or a salary or draw on your shareholder loan, and then that cash can be given to you into your portfolio that you manage on their behalf, Cory. So that does take 2 years. But I would say you need to be thinking about it a lot longer than that, because any buyer of your business is going to ask you for at least 3 years of historic financial statements. So if your 3rd year is kind of crappy because you were writing off a bunch of personal expenses, you were using your business like your personal piggy bank, you got a whole bunch of stuff in there that shouldn't have been there, then that 3rd year doesn't look very good, and you only have 2 years. And if your business was adversely affected by COVID, you've got to go back first, because you want to demonstrate to your buyers that you have a good business. And now, COVID hit it. It's now rebuilding and it's growing. So you don't want to necessarily only show them the COVID years if they're kind of crappy. You want to go back further to show them the potential of this business, because that's what a buyer is buying. They're buying the future potential of the business. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. If every year you've been doing improvements and you've been growing your business and you've been working on the drivers of business value, then when you go to sell it, it's an annual decision. Am I ready to sell? Yeah, no. Am I ready to sell? Yeah, no. And you actually are already ready, and you can exit on your own terms.
That's right. Reminded me of something else too. You mentioned when COVID comes along. Well, we all pray that'll never happen again in our lifetimes. But there will be other events that will occur in the lifetime of our businesses, right? Whether it's economic, whether it's, a key person in the business maybe gets sick or moves away or becomes a competitor. I've had that happen to me.
Technological change.
Technological change, government legislation change. I went through that, and yeah.
Usually
So
those are things that are outside of your company. And like when you think about political, economic,
right,
social, technological, legal, regulatory, like what are all those things that change that could have a really serious impact on your business, or maybe just businesses in one industry,
yeah,
rather like the COVID hit everything. But, there were certainly some businesses that flourished during COVID. Some people said they had their best year ever during COVID. So not every business was the COVID was hard on every business, like Zoom for one thing, right? Like
right,
their sales just escalated during COVID.
yeah, right, and that's all true. And my point is really that you don't know what's coming, or what's going to be the next thing, and if you're prepared from the start, going
Yeah.
into whatever that event is, you're that much more secure in handling the wave of that's going to accrue for your
That's one
business.
thing
So
we learn as
yeah,
farmers. We don't know what Mother Nature will throw at us, but we know it was.
that's right. Yeah, rain, too much rain one day, too much sun the next day, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the snow, too early snow,
Mm,
time. Some years when the crop's not very good, you kind of hope for hail, but
mm,
that's not
yeah.
the year to get it.
Yes. Well, but generally in business, we don't want to hope for hail. We want to be prepared for whatever may come. And you mentioned investments inside the business with those extra funds being offside and that kind of thing. And it reminded me of a gentleman I used to work for. I worked for him in the early to mid '90s. I worked for him for a couple of years, and he had a storefront business in Vancouver. I won't say what industry it was, or what the company was. And he's a good guy. I don't mean in that sense he wasn't a good guy. He was a very good guy. He was a good mentor for me in many ways. But he said, when he first bought the business years before that, he had the opportunity to buy his property that his store was on, and he didn't do it. And now his son has taken over the business years ago when I worked there. And that was like, well, I'd say early to mid '90s. That was 25, 30 years ago. They still don't own that building. So my point is that with a little bit of strategic planning, some guidance from some experts like yourself, not only could the father have bought that property, but then the son could have bought one or two or three more along the way as well. So it's not that it just affects even the person's lifestyle while they're in the business, right? It can
Yeah.
affect generations. It can have a generational effect on the
That's
whole
right.
family.
And one of the key concepts in business is leverage. And so often people use the word, but they don't always understand it. And basically, in simple terms, leverage just means using other people. So whether you're
Right.
using other people's money, other people's time, other people's capital, that's leverage. So, think about, how long would it take any one of us to buy a house if we had to pay cash?
Mhm.
None of us would ever buy a house. But
Right.
we get to leverage the money we do have. So the money we put for a down payment, we then leverage with all the money the bank will lend to us. Then yes, the bank gets security and they register a mortgage on our home and we have to pay them back. But that's an example of leverage. There's many, many examples where we would never be able to purchase for an acquisition if we didn't use some debt. So leveraging debt, same as we need to leverage other people. So we can't do, say everything ourselves. We have to use other people to get some of these things done to be able to grow our businesses to a point and to make our businesses less risky. And so, yeah, buying real estate. We know that buying real estate, there's lots of businesses, small businesses, that the only value in that business when the business is sold is real.
Right.
So it sometimes makes it easier to sell the business because you're selling the real estate with the business than trying to sell the business alone when you don't own the real estate. So it definitely can be a strategy.
For sure. And even if there really is no practical way to sell a certain type of business, technology is advanced, or, that owner didn't keep up or whatever. If that owner owns the property, and especially if that property is in a great location for that type of business, a different similar kind of business, or they can rent that property out, lease it out to someone else and continue to make money essentially off that business, but off the property from that. So there's lots of ways to use the business to grow your personal wealth, right?
Yeah. And, not often when we talked earlier about buying a business. And so when I'm working with people who want to grow through acquisition, so we have choice. When we want to grow our business, do we grow by investing in sales and marketing, or do we grow by buying out the competition? Or,
Right.
we can grow through acquisition. But it's always that, often smaller business owners will say, well, I can't afford to buy a business. And okay, like you don't understand the concept of leverage because you don't have to have all the money. And
Right.
sometimes the bank will lend you some, but very often the person selling the business will be your bank, which is what we call vendor financing.
Right.
So lots of businesses that are on the smaller side can have a vendor financing component. So there are, we talked about earlier, some of these businesses that don't think they have a potential buyer. Well, if I came to that business owner and I said, I don't have all the money, but I can give you a little bit up front, and I can make payments to you from the profits of the business, 99% of them would say yes rather than close the doors and get me.
Right.
So vendor financing is, you're not going to be able to walk into certain businesses and say, yeah, will you finance me? But there are certain ones that you would be able to get vendor financing. So when you're thinking about buying a business, what's your acquisition target? Who are you targeting? Who's looking to sell? You're looking for someone who's older, wants to retire. You're looking to buy a business in a rural part of Alberta. And I know that that's certainly the way a lot of newcomers are coming to Canada. So a lot of people that are coming from some countries where they've had blue collar jobs or they've been working, they're coming and they're buying businesses in some of our rural communities because that's a way for them to fast track their immigration. And many of them are coming, they can't get a loan because they're not a Canadian, not a permanent resident. Very difficult for them to get any kind of traditional financing. Sometimes there are private lenders in their community group or their cultural group that will help people get started and loan them money personally. But
Yeah.
many of them, again, if we can find a vendor willing to finance, that's a really viable exit option for some of our rural community businesses.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And you mentioned before, most of Canada is rural, right? There's really only a few large cities in this size. Actually, it's funny we mentioned this week. I saw the announcement. Canada crossed over 40 million citizens or residents. I forget what they called it, but 40 million people living in Canada, 40 million Canadians. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, the majority of those are in rural communities. And without strong rural communities, everyone's just going to end up in a city one day. And I love being in the city. I love all that it affords, the conveniences. But if I could have everything I need and live in a small town, I would do that. There's something about the people. There's something about the atmosphere of being in a small town, the slower pace, more fresh air, bigger skies.
Well, affordability too. Again, when
Absolutely.
we try again think about tying our personal goals to our business goals, that the cost of living in a small community is a fraction of what it is in the city. And like the cup's half full and the cup's half empty.
That's true.
So
Absolutely.
there are wonderful things about some of our smaller communities, and there are things that'll drive you batty. But it's just a matter of how do you cope with those things that drive you up the wall, and how do you accelerate and celebrate the things that you love about those smaller communities.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. So we've got about 10 minutes left. We don't have to close down yet, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about how people can best get a hold of you. We'll come back to this again at the end, but I think it's a good chance to just put a little plug in there for your business. What's your website?
Scan the QR code and that should take you to my website. If you want to type it in, it's just provisionbusinessadvisors.com. So you can find us that way. On my website, there's a link for you to book a discovery call. I do lots. I love talking to people, helping them find their way. So that's a really easy way to engage with us. You can always, give us a call or text us as well, and our numbers are on our website. So yeah, but don't be a stranger. We're happy to talk to people, and that kind of comes from my educator and my not-for-profit background. I know it's not easy to help people understand things and have conversations with individuals. And so this is part of this is the next horizon in my life. It's helping people build more valuable businesses and be able to exit their businesses on their own term or buy a business to help them. Because sometimes that's what we have to do first. Like sometimes we're not big enough to get the exit we want. And you say, oh,
Right.
I don't have time. I don't have the resources to be able to grow this business. Okay, let's go on to a growth by acquisition skit for a while. Let's
Yeah.
buy up let's buy up the your competitors in the surrounding towns or in the next community or whatever it is, that you become big enough to be attractive to the kind of potential exit that you want. Some people, some people just want to close the doors, and so that's okay too.
Yeah.
But then we if we know that strategically from the beginning, then we invest strategically that that's the goal. And if
Right.
you only want to be self-employed and you're not going to get that payday at the end, then we have to be conscious of siphoning off those resources into your portfolio that's outside of your business
That's right.
so that you're not waiting for that lump sum, or you're
Right.
not feeling that trapped that you have to keep your business going because you depend on the wage or the dividend you're getting from that business to fund
Right.
your lifestyle. So the more you can again harmoniously think about what is the end for me, what's the exit plan, you can from day one start siphoning off that, for $500 a month or whatever it is to put into your cash portfolio and then reinvest the rest of your earnings in growing your business. And it's the same decisions people have to make every day, whether they're on a salary or not. Am I going to
Right.
save my paycheck, or am I
Yeah.
going to,
Yeah.
and am I going to buy the toys and go on the holidays and live a high life and then have nothing for my retirement or my next horizon? Or am I going to be intentional and strategic about squirreling away that little bit of money every year so that I do have those resources side of the business?
Yeah. And speaking of buying a business, I know it can vary by industry, size of business, whatever. But let's say we're talking about a typical small business in a small rural town in Alberta or British Columbia or Saskatchewan. What's the generally how long does it take to make transaction from say inquiring to the business owner or the seller? They may not necessarily be actively thinking about selling, but you're looking for a business and you like that industry. Let's say it's a restaurant or a liquor store or whatever, right? Whatever it is, gas station. How long does it typically take, or what's the range usually from approaching that business owner to then you becoming opening the doors yourself and you're in charge?
Oh
Is it
yeah, I mean
really
it
typical?
really is a man's question, and so much like we learn in economics, it's supply and demand. So the type of business will factor in like when I think about where our farm is. It's a community of 2,500 people. The businesses that service the agricultural sector are going to sell faster than the retailer on Main Street because the retailer is not connected to for the industries that are driving the economic drivers of that community. So it really is very dependent on the nature of the business and how many assets there are. But typically, on average, from the time somebody decides they want to go to market, it takes a year to sell their business. So if you think about, the 2 or 3 years of preparation, so we always say talk to us 5 years before, because sometimes we have to do a lot of work with business owners on being realistic about who potential buyers are, what the business is worth. And as we talked earlier about belief, sometimes that takes time. And sometimes people have to put their business, just like selling a house, sometimes people will list their house way above what it's worth. And then when it sits on the market for 6 months, then they may say, oh yeah, maybe I should bring the price down. Same thing happens with businesses. Some, business owners are so in love with their business. They're always optimistic about what their business is worth. They're often unrealistic about what their business is worth. And sometimes part of that process is to let them list it for more than it's worth. And then when it doesn't sell, say, okay, now are you serious about this? Because if you need to sell your business for that, here's all the work you need to do so that it's worth that. Do you want to
Right.
do it? And
Right.
they either say yes or no.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is funny how emotionally connected people are to their business and how they don't always look at it. And I mean this in the nicest possible way,
Yeah.
but they don't always look at it realistically, like what it's actually worth. And I watched many episodes of Shark Tank and Dragon's Den. And there's some people where you're like, okay, they're trying to negotiate down. But in other cases, it's super clear, like it's obvious that this person that has way overvalued their business, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
And,
there's
and again, it's human beings, and human
yeah,
beings are going to do that. And so, yeah, then that's why I really encourage people to go through the diagnostic, because we actually educate you on where value is and where it is. And also part of the value of your business will be dependent on the industry you're in. So
right,
people, come in thinking, oh, I want a 10x multiple. Well, you're not in an industry that's going to get a 10x multiple. So if you want a higher multiple, then part of the strategic work we do between now and exit is we tweak your business, and we pivot so that you
mm,
you look more like that industry than the one you are now. So that
right,
maybe you can attract a buyer that sees the potential of that industry. Because many of us don't fit nicely in one industry code with the kind of businesses we run, where it's a combination of things. And so, we're like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Who
yeah,
is your potential buyer, and where will they see value in your business? But the value, where value is, really a lot of the value in businesses, especially service-based, same can really be true for manufacturing. Manufacturing will have more capital. So they have more machinery, more equipment, more real estate, more vehicles. So
right,
there's a baseline. Your baseline value is always, what are your tangible assets worth, which are the things you could sell on Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace. Those things
yeah,
you could parcel off and sell.
turn into cash,
That's your bottom barrel value. But
yeah,
everything else comes from what we would call intangible assets. So it comes from, you consistently having sales. It comes from your processes that you have. It comes from, what have you developed in terms of your branding and your social capital? What have you done with your customers? Are you diversified? Do you have all your eggs in one basket? How well have you trained your team? All of those things that don't show up on your balance sheet. Those are things that you have actually expensed over the years, that you've invested in marketing, you've invested in HR stuff, you've invested in processes, and those have been expenses on your P&L all these years. Now we're saying, okay, yes, you wrote those off, but actually intangible assets. They're
yeah,
actually things people would buy. There are some businesses that will sell just because somebody wants their phone number, or they
right,
want their social media followers, or they want their website domain. That there are all those kinds of assets too that are valuable to potential buyers.
right. And that's a really good point. I didn't think it to fit into this conversation, so it wasn't even on my radar. But when you mentioned that, it just reminds me of the increasing value of an email list, for example, or nowadays even a list of customer phone numbers, because texting promotional offers and reminders to clients, to customers and prospects is now an increasingly important asset to many businesses. And even if anyone takes anything, doesn't remember anything else from this thing tonight, whatever you're doing in your business, start or continue or try to grow your email list and your phone number list of clients, because that could be the number one thing that you sell. Even if you shut your doors in your business, you could maybe sell that for a huge amount of money potentially. So obviously,
Yeah, you
absolutely
could.
yeah,
Some people that I've worked with, their goal has been to start, be selling internationally. Okay, if that's your goal, then we have to stand up different strategic initiatives than if your
excellent.
goal is to sell to an employee or sell to the competitor. Like, they're just different. And
Exactly.
one's not necessarily better than another, but it's the different strategies and initiatives that you want to achieve what you consider success and happiness in your life. And those are all individual.
That's right. And one last thing I'll say before we close off, because we've hit the hour mark, but one last thing I'll say is that many successful businesses are born out of other businesses that didn't quite work smoothly or what weren't the perfect fit for that owner. And all the assets that you have in the business are potentially transferable to another idea, theoretically, right? But certainly things like your customer list and your reputation and how you treated your customers and your employees can translate into another idea for sure. And whether that's, in your sort of semi-retirement or whether that, pivoting to another industry or another type of business. But I want to thank you so much for your time tonight, Laura. Again, can you just remind everyone how to get a hold of you? And
Yeah, just find us at our website, provisionbusinessadvisors.com, and there's contact forms there. You can book a complimentary discovery call. So participate how you wish, and you visit our website.
Awesome. And if you haven't already done that, folks, you can scan the QR code on the screen there. And speaking of QR codes, I'm just going to bring mine up, share that as well. In the bottom right corner of my screen, there's a QR code, and that's for a free discovery call with me. I'll spend as much time as necessary with you to help make sure we're a good fit to work together. So if you like anything you heard tonight from myself or Laura, you want to work with either of us or us together, reach out to one of us at these QR codes. We'll be happy to sit down with you and find out exactly how we can help you. We'd love to help you if we can, if we're a good fit. And if we're not, we know other people in the industry that we can point you towards, and we'd be happy to do that too. So thanks again, Laura. Thanks everyone for your time. And we'll leave it for there again. We're back next Tuesday for open office hours. I'll have a different partner here, and we'll look forward to seeing you all then. Take care, everybody.
Good night, folks.